and stuff like that. Awesome. But I hope you guys have, a really phenomenal talk to go eat a granola bar on the side. And yes, just sharing a lot of information. Taylor's got the young woman who's Miss Bethesda for Black Pageant Renaissance events that we're partnering with you for. So she's going to just ask you questions about your history and like your care. So
Okay.
awesome. And I am
All right. Thank you, Jamorra, for that intro. Hello.
Hello.
Again, my name is Taylor James. I am the current Miss Bethesda, a preliminary competition for Miss Maryland in the Miss America opportunity. And I always infuse Blackness into my pageant practices, into my pageantry. It's something that's extremely important to me. Just for some context, former BSU president at my alma mater, Wayne State. My social impact initiative or community service initiative focuses on, it's called E3, educational, environmental, and economic justice is what I tackle through that. So obviously issues directly impacting the Black community, that's something that I don't shy away from. Um, and it's very difficult. Right now, I am a nonprofit strategist. I find that it's difficult to reconcile sometimes the two identities, being a pageant woman and also being a woman that's very true to myself, my culture, and my values. And I know you've done some extensive research just kind of on race, gender, and even pageantry. So I'm super excited to talk to you. Could you brief me a little bit on, I guess, who you are and what you do? I've for sure done my research for these questions, so I know, but I want our viewers to get an idea.
Course, no problem. Thank you. My name is Dr. Elwood Watson, and I am a professor of history, gender studies, and Black studies at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee. And I've been here for quite a while now. I've been here since 1997, so I might have been here longer than you've been born. So, so I'm pretty well versed in academia now. I've been pretty much had a relatively long academic career, and I do a lot of work that deals with gender, in particular, like I said, sexuality, intersectionality, and those areas in particular. Those are my areas that I really focus on quite a bit. The Miss America anthology that I had done, I've always had an interest in the Miss America pageant because when I was a little boy, it always came around school. Now I think it's on the internet, but when I was a little boy back in the 70s and stuff, growing up of age, my mom and sister, one of my sisters used to watch it quite a bit. And it was always during the early part of the school year. It was in September, I believe, because school had just started with us and stuff. And it would always come on like once a year to be late at night, like at 9 or 10. And as a little child, you didn't want to go to bed. So, you want to stay up and watch it, you can. So you stayed up, so, and they would always talk about, you know, I think she's gonna win or that one's gonna win. And my sister would always either pick the second runner up or the first runner. Well, they'd always pick somebody who they thought might win. And some okay, like they get it right. I mean, I can't remember how I actually got it right all the time, but like I said, and then after a while, like a lot of teenage boys, I was more into sports and everything else. I didn't pay attention to it all. And one of my graduate students back in 1998. Her name is Darcy Martin. She's the one who actually became a professor in the women's studies department. She's retired now. She did an article on the Miss America pageant for me. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I said, I wonder how much work's been done on this. As an academic, you always get curious about stuff. And I had, at that time, I was shocked at how little work had been done on it. I was like, wow, I thought there'd be a lot more done on this than, given, because I mean, you got race, you got gender, you got sexuality, you've got history, you got psychology, you've got, mass media. I mean, you can't get much more interdisciplinary, and reality television was beginning to start around that time, really, really much more important. And it was reality television before reality television was so-called reality television was beginning. So in a way, so I thought, I said, well, Darcy, I said, would you want to teach a student at that time? Would you be willing to work on this together and let's see if we can get an article out of it? So she goes, of course, Dr. Watson. And then we sent it to different places. I tightened it up and added things to it. We sent it to every journal, went down and they all rejected it, but we went to the Journal of Popular Culture, which is the top journal in the field of pop culture. They accepted it. And a year later, it got the Russell B. Nye Award for Best Article of the Year in the Journal. So we were real happy about that. And then we took it to Pop Culture Association, where there was another woman there. And we said, well, she goes, I think an anthology could work on this. And so we put out a call for papers, and we had enough people that came in and submitted pieces. So we had to narrow it down to about, 9 to 10, pieces that we decided to use. And that was that. The anthology of that was called There She Is, Miss America, The Politics of Sex, Beauty, and Race in America's Most Famous Pageant. The article that we published was called The Miss America Pageant, Pluralism, Femininity, and Cinderella All in One. That was the title of the article. So anyway, and that's been out for about 20, 21 years now. And that was my interest in the pageant. And I've written various op-eds on the pageant. I had a little piece in the Times with several other articles about back in 2013 about it. It was like a Room for Debate series. Some people are for it, others are not. That was, there's always been a lightning rod there. There's a lot of people who detest everything they think it stands for, and there are other people who are supportive of it. I think a lot of people are probably indifferent toward it, or ambiguous. But I think that, I came down on the side of it's the personal choice. If a grown woman wants to make a pageant in a pageant, do I think little girls, mothers should force little girls who don't want to be in pageants? No. If the little girl doesn't want to do it, don't do it. But at 19, 20, 21, 30, 20, she's a grown woman. She can make it. Nobody's forcing her to enter that pageant. I mean, she's got a right to make that decision. That's her decision. She's intelligent enough to make that decision if she wants to. That's just, nobody's forcing it. And so I think that, I think to me, that's what I look at it. But I think it's it's a lot of dynamics that go around it and everything else. And I'm sure that might be some of your questions. So, but I'll stop there to give you, that's my background. Right. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. You highlighted a lot of really important points. I think it's a personal choice, but it's not a personal choice that comes lightly. The Miss America opportunity, for better or for worse, it is the largest scholarship provider in the country for women. And when you look objectively, especially after their rebrand, their whole 2.0 phase, everything, style, scholarship, service, success, those are all things that Black women have and excel at just like all other women. So of course, on the surface, it looks like it's a great opportunity for everyone, but there are biases and other things that come with competing in the opportunity that a lot of us have gone through and analyzed. And it's kind of like it's a decision to, I guess, try and fix it from the inside. And like I said, that's something that I definitely do by I think at the beginning of my pageantry journey, my goal was just assimilation. I'm like, okay, I'm always going to straighten my hair. I'm just going to not necessarily talk too much about race. And I think the way that I have tried to do my whole Miss Bethesda journey and also my Miss Wayne County journey in 2022, when I started competing in the Miss America opportunity, is actually when I said, you know what, I'm going to talk about socio-political issues. I'm going to talk about my Blackness, because if you claim to be about service and whatever else, my service initiative is going to have to do with my community, and I'm going to get to have difficult conversations on my social media, in my interviews, and everything else. And for the moment, it's been met, pretty much with favorability. So I'm excited about that. This event that I'm working on with the support of the lovely Jamorra is Black Pageant Renaissance. And I really want to highlight Black queens, past, present, and future. So I work in, like I mentioned, nonprofit, youth development. All of my kids pretty much that I work with, 99% of my kids are Black, and they have a lot of stereotypes put on them because of literacy rates and other things. People are looking at statistics and looking at certain things not holistically, and not believing that our babies are bright and smart and going to change the world. And with that, with this event, I kind of want to bring my work into that by having a youth aspect, kind of mentoring young Black and brown girls and making them all feel like princesses. So that's Black Pageant Renaissance. And I'm so excited that you've been able to speak with us and talk about it. So I do have some questions based off of your research. So
If
based
you
on,
don't mind, before you go for a second, when
yeah,
you mentioned about the controversial topics and things of that nature, before I forgot, I want to let you know, I think people now in the era, right, whether people genuinely mean it or not, I think people are kind of looking for authenticity. So a lot, at least certain people, and I think that that is something you should be authentic as much as you can, whether you're regardless of what people want. I mean, you should be who your true self is. That being said, if you go back and somebody like mine who's studying Miss America 1993, the late Leanne Cornett, her topic was AIDS. Okay, her successor, Kimberly Aiken, Miss South Carolina, a black woman, first woman from the South who won the pageant, and one of the youngest pageant winners, homelessness. Um, Kate Shindle, Miss America 1998, condom distribution in public schools, sex education. Laura Knapfler, Miss America 2012, children who have incarcerated parents. I mean, these people years ago in the 70s, 80s probably would have tried to, before you would even have platforms, would have probably went nowhere near those kind of topics. Each one of those women went with those topics and walked off with the crown. So my point is, a platform and judges are dynamic because first of all, people say, well, it used to be like, well, the girl who won last year did this, and the girl who won last year. Yeah, well, the girl who won last year may have done that, but the girl last year is going to have a different set of judges too. The girl who won last year may not even gotten the top 10 the following year, the year before. A lot of times, a different set of judges, a different climate. So you got to be who you are. Just going by what somebody did last year and whatever, I mean, that could be a whole different set of dynamic, the whole pageant. And you look each year, look how the whole setting of the pageants are different. They're wearing different outfits, everything. So don't try to model yourself about what somebody did last year. You go by what's going to do with you. You know what I mean? So that you got to be you. It's that old saying, "I got to be me." But go ahead. I'm sorry. I think I wanted to give you that piece of advice.
no, that was great though. And even before I go into the question with that, I think that there might be a bit of cultural regression in that area surrounding pageantry. I've been involved in a lot of conversations more recently about how my CSI might be a little bit too much, it might be a little bit too political. I think depending on the pageant person, some people are living in kind of a utopia, like a post-racial, post-socioeconomic issue society, and that's the idea for some people. And unfortunately, like I think we've experienced a little bit of regression because I do remember, I mean, I was not alive yet, but I do remember reading about a lot of those topics that people were taking and running with and winning with. But I've definitely been advised on multiple occasions to tone down just my delivery or my CSI or whatever it may be. But I will get into question number one. So you have written extensively on race, gender, and beauty standards. What do you think is the cultural significance of Black women in pageantry today?
Well, I think the cultural significance of women, Black women, as well as women of color in general, they represent the diversity of America, the mosaic of America. What America is always about. America has always been a diverse nation, but for the longest time, women of color were locked out of the pageant. You had a few Native American contestants and a few Asian contestants in the pageant, but the first, at the national level, the first Black woman to ever enter the Miss America pageant was Cheryl Brown, Miss Iowa, 1970. And for the longest time, Miss America was seen as, without even people saying it was seen as a quote unquote a white woman's pageant. You had the Miss Black America pageant in September 1968. Sandra Washington won that, was the first winner of that pageant. And it was like, it started at 12 o'clock the following day, right after Miss America had ended in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And Sandra Washington, Miss Philadelphia, was the first Black recipient of Miss Black America. So as well, because women said Miss America as she was did not represent us as well. Now, over time, the pageants there's still a Miss Black America pageant, I believe, but there's still a lot of Miss America pageant has gotten so much more diverse now. And I think that it represents Black women and it represents women of all colors, but Black women, I think, represent a very major, segment and the symbolic presence within the Miss America pageant. And have done quite well in the pageant. Since 1984, the first Black Miss America was Vanessa Williams to win the pageant, 1984. Since that time, we've had 10 or 11 Black women who've won the Miss America pageant, and that's since 1984. So if you divide that among 41 years, you've had 11 Black women win the pageant in 41 years. That's not bad. That's on average every 4 or 5 years, a Black woman has won the pageant. So if you want to divide that by the length of time they've started winning, that means Black women have been winning the pageant, and certainly been very competitive at every level. So it means Black women have done well. Now, there's my reasons for I think I'm doing that. I think most likely, even today, I would say if a black woman gets to Atlantic City, she's probably more likely to clear winner her state pageant. Or she's very, very good, probably. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that that's always, I mean, but I'm saying, but I think she's probably done very well. And I think that's why black women have done so well at the national level, and particularly she's one of the states in the South. I mean, that's a given, I think that she's one of the states, or even, I think she's probably the clear winner. There's not too much competition today. That state representatives want to stand Atlantic City that year. So I think, and I does not take away from that young lady. It just shows you how good that young lady is. I'm just, I think as well. But I feel that I think that has a lot to do with it as well. And I think that, people get to see, because we still live in areas that are very, very predominantly white, and they don't really see people of color except on TV and stuff. So when they see elegant, classy, articulate, beautiful black women, a lot of women, and even other black girls who live in areas where they're not seeing where the environment may be, where there are a lot of black people, but there's not that level of opportunity to see yourself in a positive light, or an aspirational light. There's a tendency, to feel negative about yourself. And I think they see women like this. Oh, I want to be like her, or I can be like that, or I can do that as well, which they can. But, but I'm saying to me, so I think those things, black women provide a lot of, inspiration, and they provide a lot of hope. They provide a lot of, uh, education in the broader sense of the word to a lot of the public, not just other black people, but across the, geographic, regional, socioeconomic, political spectrum, and racial spectrum.
Thank you so much for that answer. I definitely agree. I think, uh, of course, when you see it, you feel like you can be it. So I really do appreciate Black representation in pageantry, and I do think that what you said about them being the clear winner, I think that that's an interesting one. I'd love to talk about that another day, maybe. But in your work, There She Is, Miss America, you tackle the politics of gender, beauty, and race. How do you think those dynamics have evolved or stayed the same since you wrote that piece?
Well, I think they've done both in a lot of ways, but they certainly have evolved. They've evolved in the sense that prior to the 1960s, except on black magazines like Ebony or Negro Digest or those type of magazines, you would not have seen any black women on the cover. And if you did, it might be on let me backtrack. If you did see magazines on the covers, it was usually a woman who was a matronly figure, the quote unquote mammy figure, or she was in a magazine. She should be in the magazine, but would always be, a heavy set black woman who's a mammy, or, about what food advertisements, or what's the best food to cook and how to cook, that type of things as well. And you never saw that, but Ebony magazine was an exception. You saw black women on the covers and things like that as well. You had Ebony fashion shows and those type of dynamics. So that's where you would see the how the fashion has evolved. Cosmetic ads up until about the 1990s, really, there was really no woman who ever got that contract for CoverGirl and stuff. And until, later on, there were a few black models always in the industry. These weren't, I'm not sure these women were in pageants. No, Jane Kennedy was. She was the Miss USA. She was Miss Ohio in 1970, Miss Jane Kennedy. But there were people like Beverly Johnson, Iman and things like that as well. They were like some of the forerunners of, models who were able to transcend across the racial line. Beth Ann Hardison, as well. And, the ones I just mentioned, Iman and Beverly John, they were considered supermodels. Naomi Campbell was another supermodel of her generation. Tyra Banks, she did a lot more commercial stuff though. She didn't I would say Naomi was on the runway more, but I think that Tyra Banks, she did, she was a supermodel, but she did like, a lot of talk shows, and and she advertised for female stuff. I mean, you're seeing her name just escapes my tongue. More recently, Alex Weck, young, she's the next generation item. I'm saying you're seeing, women like that who prior to that time would not have been considered models by 1950s, 60 standards, even among other black places on some level, so I'm saying, to me, I think it shows you the diversity of how black women and women of color have done it as well. Before I think was it MC Hammer, whoever who was, I might have been Sean Coler, but in 1995, 96, the cover girl was what he had Penelope Cruz, I think it was Heidi Klum and what was her name? What was her name? Uh, oh, it wasn't Queen Latifah, but it was another black. It was a black. It was like he had them on the cover of his new advertisement. That was not by accident. He wanted his message was this is for all women. He wanted as many women buying his product as possible, and that was not done by Latina, black, and white, but I mean, but the message was even other women who weren't of that ethnic group. This is for all of you, and I thought to me that's what that was about. So I think people realize too that black women buy makeup, black women buy cosmetics, black women buy women of color buy cosmetics too, and I mean now you have makeup that is made for women of color. The Queen Latifah, which she has the Queen collection. Venus and Serena had their own makeup. I think CoverGirl makeup. Where look at Viola Davis with L'Oreal, Halle Berry. I think she might be with L'Oreal. I mean, look at all these women of color now who are with these Penelope Cruz. I mean, they're whereas you did not see that in the 1970s and 80s as much. It was always white women with Christy Brinkley or Cindy Crawford or it's like I'm saying, and not I say these women were not attractive women, they weren't deserving of modeling these things, but I'm just saying women of color were largely marginalized and not considered the consumer market. I remember Diana Ross and them talk about how they used to have to mix makeup together and stuff in order for it to look better on their skin. I mean, nowadays that's no longer the case. You got makeup that's designed for various skin tones, which is a good thing. I'm just saying, but at that time, so it just goes to show these are various ways, consumer wise, aesthetic wise, cultural wise, economically wise, how the fashion industry is transferring for women of color.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been, I mean, that was, of course, a leading question. I knew that there had been major cultural shifts in all of those areas. So I'm definitely, I mean, while we still have our challenges, I'm glad to be a Black woman competing in pageantry in 2025. um, what role have pageants played, do you think, in shaping or challenging America's ideals and ideas about Black femininity?
What role has pageants played in?
I'll ask it again. What role have pageants played in shaping or challenging America's ideals about Black femininity?
That Black women are diverse, like any other group of women. That Black women are, indeed, as I said, beautiful and articulate, and are very, very competitive, and are just as worthy of attention and can compete in pageants just successfully as any other type of women. And I feel, that we, well, I'm not a Black woman, we as Black people, but Black women can certainly, show that they have that competitive spirit, they have that intellectual spirit, they have that, fierce desire to be successful, and they show that they are just as worthy of love and admiration and as any other group of women. I think those are some of the things it does, and I think it also shows too that Black it used the 70s. It said Black is just as beautiful as any other race of people.
Yes, I love that answer. Um, how do you respond? This might be a little bit into the controversial, the tough questions. How do you respond to those who argue, and you could agree or disagree, how do you respond to those who argue that pageants are outdated or incompatible with Black feminist progress?
Not necessarily. I disagree. I think so many people. I think there are certain people, segment of society, who feels that if you are a woman and you pursue the pageant route or any kind of glamour route, that somehow that makes you less of a woman or you're not a feminist. That to me is ridiculous. I mean, you don't, right now, if a man, let's say a guy was a football player, then we do have the quote unquote the dumb jock stereotype and all those kind of things. But really, right now, somebody told you a man was an engineer. And on the other hand, but he plays, on the weekends, he plays professional football once a month, whatever. Nobody would say anything about that. But if a woman, if she was, she's an electrical engineer, a chemical engineer, but she participates in competitive pageants on, once in a while. Why does she do that? I mean, some people would say that. I mean, it's like, so, I mean, it's kind of hypocritical. I mean, it doesn't make her any less of a woman. It certainly doesn't take away from her intelligence, but it's like somehow if any woman that pursues this pageant route or decides to go this route, somehow she's not being a real feminist. But nobody would ever say about a man being a strong man or not. He's not really a male activist because he does these other things. He could be a boxer on the weekend or whatever. Nobody would say anything. I don't know anybody would criticize that. And some of these same people, as far as I'm concerned, are very hypocritical because a lot of these same people who criticize the swimsuit competition of a pageant, they're the same ones who watch these Victoria's Secret model ads. They're always critiquing bodies of women and whether it's in bulimia and stuff, or even the bodies of men for that matter. These are the same people who have no problem watching all these other people's bodies, but yet they attack the swimsuit competition. And I was like, well, that's nothing but hypocrisy, whether they're aware of that fact or not. I'm just saying, to me, I disagree with that logic. I think, to me, I don't think it's about choice. The feminist movement was about choice. That's what the feminist was about. It was, I mean, so if you're talking about choice, women should have a right to pursue that path if they choose to do so. Nobody's forcing women to choose this path. Nobody's forced. That's why I don't have a lot of patience for people who argue about what does this. And I had one of my students one time, and she meant well. She was like, "Well, why do I have to wear a swimsuit? Why do I do that? Why should I do that?" I said, "Guess what? I got a PhD." I said there were certain things I had to do to get that PhD. I had to take comprehensive exams. I had to write a dissertation. I had to pass these. I said, no, nobody forced me to get it. I didn't have to get, nobody said you're going to get a PhD or else. I said, but these were the things I had to do in order to get this PhD. Now I had to write not to get it. I could have dropped out at any time. I said, but the reality is I wanted this PhD because I wanted this academic career. These are certain things you have to do in order to do things. I mean, that's my point is I'm saying that if nobody's forcing women to any path, but these are the rules of a pageant. These are the rules of certain things of any kind of entity or institution, and you have a right to pursue them or not. So I just do I to answer your question that no, I don't think it's I don't my personal opinion, no, I don't see anything anti-feminist about wanting to enter a pageant. If a woman wants to enter a pageant, that's her choice. And the feminist movement was about choice. As long as she's not being forced to do it, go for it.
Thank you for that question. Of course, as a pageant woman, I definitely agree. I just have three more questions.
Sure.
This one is kind of related to um, your work and kind of your why. You kind of touched on in the beginning, but as a Black man, writing about pageantry and gender and sexuality, um, you seem to handle it with so much care and grace, and you seem to be very holistic when you're speaking about Black women and Black women in pageants. So I wanted to know kind of what inspires you to be like that. What have you learned from Black women scholars, professionals, pageant women, just Black women that continues to shape your work and your worldview?
Well, I'm a Black man who has three sisters. I also have three brothers. Well, two now, one passed away. But so I come from a family of, a loving Black mother, very loving Black grandmothers. So I mean, I've always been around Black women who loved and supported one another, and as well. And I think that also Black women who very well always supported other Black women. Were always, supportive of other Black women, wanted to see other Black women succeed, and felt, as well. So I think I've always seen that kind of, that love among Black women, at least the ones I've known, have loved other Black women and wanted to be, support other Black women. And I think that, like I said, I look at it this way. I was telling, this is kind of a sidestep. About 20 years ago, I think it was about when Barack Obama, not quite 20 years ago, he was running for president. And what happened was there's a group of teenagers, young people came in for a summer camp. It wasn't, they called it camp, but they lived in a dormitory. So, but it was, apparently they wanted me to come because I did gender studies and how they said, a lot of guys are being rude to the young ladies. They'll cut them off in the line or they'll cut them off in class, whatever. And could you come talk to them? Hillary was running for president that year. Barack Obama won the nomination, for president, eventually became president. And I went there and told them, I said, look, young men, I said, we almost had a woman who became the presidential nominee of our party this year. I said, your age, young as you guys are, I said, you're going to be working with women. Okay, you're gonna be working with women, and a woman may very well be your boss. She's still gonna be your coworker. I said, you may very well have women college presidents. You may have to go to a woman doctor at some point who may save your life. I said, and whether you want or not, I said, some woman somewhere brought you into this world. Okay, yes, a man may have contributed to it, but I said a woman gave you birth. Some woman brought you into this world. Some woman somewhere brought you into this world. Okay, it was a woman who did so. I said, so you need to be more careful. I said it in a way like that. They said. I saw the people who they asked me to come talk. A couple weeks later, they said immediately those guys' attitudes changed. I mean, because I wasn't the other way. I didn't just start yelling and tell them stop being jerks. I mean, you have to have to read people, but I said in a way that made them think, as well. And everything I said was factual. I mean, it was nothing, so they couldn't dispute what I said, stuff as well. But I think that's how I made it, clear. I've always been I've always felt, in gender equality, and I think, I've always felt, I'm a feminist, and I think that I feel, both races, genders. I mean, I think are very, worthy of equal respect and everything else as well. So I think a lot of us be just genetic, environmental factors, how I grew up, personal genetic beliefs, and just, believing in equality across the board, whether it's racial equality, gender equality, sexual equality, economic equality, those things. That's just kind of in my DNA, just who I am. So
Thank you so much for that answer. Also raised by very strong Black women. I have my dad too. So many strong Black women around me, and it's a really beautiful upbringing. I do like this whole conversation is making me want to pursue the PhD path more and more. I just loved learning about your research and stuff. I think I'm looking at like Africana studies or something like that. I want to focus on Black economics because that was my undergrad, and definitely some Black feminism in there. So I definitely am strongly
there's a lot of stuff there.
even more, yeah, after this conversation. But my last two questions. So we kind of talked about this a little bit. You were discussing some of the former pageant queens platforms, and they were pretty they could be considered divisive or controversial. Like I said, I've noticed a little bit of a regression, but that's neither here nor there. But some people, like me as an activist, and I have several other pageant women that feel the same way that I talk to all the time about this. We're activists, unapologetically so, and we consider pageantry to be a tool in our activist toolbox. And that confuses a lot of people sometimes because, pageantry and like the ideals, I guess the stereotypes, it doesn't seem like it would be an actual platform for you to have a voice on some of these issues, especially like I said, if that cultural regression is real, if the whole American utopia ideology has seeped into pageantry, then that's definitely a thing. But it's like I compete because style, which is one of the points of the Miss America crown, is my favorite. I think when you're in a nice dress and heels and people invite you somewhere and you're in a crown and sash and you open your mouth and you're talking about controversial issues that you're able to kind of sweet talk your way into having some of these conversations, these really important conversations, that's like just top tier to me. So my question is, I mentioned that my platform focuses on self-determination through educational, environmental, and economic justice. In your opinion, how can Black pageantry intersect with the fight for equity?
um I think it could fit. I would say that it can, as far as it can certainly make an effort to demonstrate, that the importance of equity, by representation. I think representation in and of itself is there, and that's very representation to me is really crucial. I think you have to have representation. People have to need to see themselves, and I think it's important. So by that way, I think it can also spur and blind people, and this, Black people, Black women are a part of the pageant system too, like anyone else. And like I said, and are very actively involved in the pageant system. And I've seen that over the years. I definitely see it, a lot more, Black participation in pageants. And I think that in and of itself, just by seeing those numbers, I think people realize that, okay, well, there's something here. It's a market. And also too, we have to go back to the dollar bills. It all starts back with the dollar bills. When people start seeing that, they'll start putting money invested behind it, because it's about, I mean, we live in a capitalist system, and the bottom line is everything. I hate to say it, but it's about money. Even when it comes right down to the church, it's about money. We live in a capitalist system. The backbone of a capitalist system is about money. They see that, they see potential dollar bills, they say we'll start acting upon this and everything else as well. And we'll put those, and I think that's how it'll start. And then at that point, once you get that financial support, and that financial support is begins to start flowing, as it becomes stable, then that's when you can start incorporating more and pushing forward toward activist goals and moving it forward to other. But you've got to have that economic base in order to do that, and I think that, but you show people and show corporations and show people that somehow that is the case, which is why I'm kind of surprised the Miss America pageant hasn't really tapped into, or even some corporations myself have not tapped into trying to get back, because right now we're a really racially diverse nation, more so than ever, and a lot of women of color of all races are in their pageants. And I'm surprised that I was like a corporation like Pepsi and Nabisco or something like that, I would certainly be partnering with the Miss America pageant right now, because I mean, and that this would be an opportune time to really, rejuvenate and bring it back. Because right now, if I'm not mistaken, the national pageant is on internet now. Is that right? There's not, it's not on TV like it was. I haven't seen it in the past couple of years, but I gather the national pageant is not shown on ABC, CBS, NBC. It was on
Correct. Yep.
and I think that and I'm wondering why some of these corporations used to back it like in the 70s and 80s. Right now would be an opportune time to get back into it. And at least I think so. So I think that but anyway, and they may very well do that. But like I think as well. But I thought that and I think like Miss America pageant is like I always tell people it's like a Timex watch when it's like a licking, but it keeps on ticking. Whenever it's down for the count, it comes right back and roars right back. When people think it's dead, it survived World War II. It was canceled for several years after 1929, as I put in my book, and then